what's free for the rest of us but precious to migrant workers. Migrant workers love ice. You could just fill a can with just ice, which costs nothing, giving way to a lorry with migrant workers sitting in the back when they want to change lanes. Anyone can help migrant workers. That doesn't involve giving money or volunteering.
Every time there's a crisis, the first respondents happen to be a group of migrant workers, multiple issues to do with their lives and livelihoods in Singapore. What then is the follow-up from the rest of us in society? Welcome to another episode of the Rishi Report SG60 podcast series. Whenever there's some kind of crisis in Singapore and migrant workers end up being the first respondents, be it a fire in River Valley or the formation of a sinkhole in Tanjong Katong, this sparks debate about their lives in Singapore, whether it's issues of safety, issues of wages, issues of their standards of living in this country. And we are also very fortunate because there are volunteer organizations out there who work closely with these migrant worker communities to help improve their lives in Singapore. I am sitting today with the founder of one of these organizations called ItsRainingRaincoats that has been around for 10 years. Please welcome Dipa Swaminathan. Tell me a little bit about ItsRainingRaincoats and what exactly happens there.
So, to your point, I think that's really right. I was reflecting on that very topic this morning, actually, because we are turning 10 this year. And one of the things that just came to me as I was making notes on my iPhone is that ItsRainingRaincoats started in reverse gear. Literally in reverse gear, because I met two migrant workers standing in a rainstorm on the street where I lived. I turned into the street, windscreen wipers going crazy, and out of the corner of my left eye, I saw these two men standing there getting drenched. I was driving slowly because it was a rainstorm. I drove past them thinking, that's so sad. Here I am sitting in the shelter of my car and there they are getting wet. And then 2 seconds later, the universe struck a proverbial lightning in my head, which made me stop, reverse the car, and I took them in. And that was the beginning of the journey. But it's quite almost poetically ironic that the journey began in reverse gear.
Yeah,
but it's never stopped going. I've never been able to take my foot off the pedal. That was actually 11 years ago. It took 9 months as if to gestate and give birth to ItsRainingRaincoats, because it was just me going around helping migrant workers.
Yep.
And then some months later, the story, I've done a TEDx talk on it, which is on YouTube, so I won't go into it here. But that went viral, and then media picked up, and then the Singapore Kindness found out about it a few months later, and they reached out to me to do a one-day event for Kindness Day in 2015. And they said, what can you think of? And I'd heard the song It's Raining Men the night before, so I said, why don't we do It's Raining Raincoats, where everybody carries a disposable raincoat in their bag. So if they see a migrant worker caught in the rain, they could give it to him.
Right.
And that's how it was born. It was meant to be a one-day event, because it's a bit of a tongue twister. If I'd known I was naming something that was going to last, I might have thought of a name that rolls off the tongue a little easier. But It's Raining Raincoats it was. And so it took 9 months as if to give birth to a child. My other two kids are getting ready to leave home, but Raining Raincoats is here to stay.
I'm so glad you told us this origin story because, if someone who doesn't know, and I'm sure a lot of people ask you about it.
Yes.
My first instinct when you told me that you were struck by proverbial lightning, I thought the PAP called you and said, can you go and help these people or not? But apparently not, right? So you're just talking about yourself.
I see the lightning connection. No, I was not thinking of that lightning.
The reason a lot of recent media has talked about the work ItsRainingRaincoats does is because you recently raised some funds for some of the workers who were involved in the sinkhole rescue. I think you raised over $70,000 from the organization.
Yeah.
Is this a regular thing, doing fundraisers for the community? Or what else do you do as a volunteer organization? Is it fair to call it a volunteer organization, first off?
Okay, a lot of good questions. Yes, it is very fair and very accurate to call it a volunteer organization because even though we're a registered charity and we do a number of things, and I'll come to that in a minute, we only have 2 full-time staff. Everybody else, including myself, we're all unpaid volunteers. So it's an organization that is largely run and led by unpaid volunteers, because for the longest time, we were just a ground-up movement. We were not a registered anything. And it's only during COVID when we, I think, had our breakout year in 2020. Most of Singapore was baking focaccia bread or gardening in 2020.
Don't forget the Dalgona coffee.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying we didn't, because from the minute we woke up, there would be our phones would be flooded with requests from migrant workers because they were being decanted, they were being moved, they were scared, we were catering food, and we did all this as an organization of just volunteers,
If I may just pause us right here, because just to bring everybody back to this moment, during 2020, there was a situation of the spread of the virus in the dormitories
Correct.
of many of the migrant workers.
Correct.
And that's why there was this situation where they were being moved.
Correct.
Even off the island onto cruise ships.
Absolutely.
If I remember correctly.
Absolutely. To cruise ships, to hotels. But, they would sometimes be moved late at night because there might have been an outbreak where they were staying. And the food being catered to them would have gone to the place where they were meant to be staying because everything was happening so quickly. So our volunteers would get calls late at night from a group of workers saying, "Madam, we have not eaten." And these volunteers would then use their own, because there was no time to do anything else, they would just order pizzas and pay for it and send it. And we once had a case of a migrant worker calling us with an infected wisdom tooth.
Oh, dear.
This was during the peak of the lockdown. Now, what do? You could see the guy because he had, this side of his face was swollen. We didn't even know if that was a wisdom tooth or what it was.
Right.
But the amount of energy it took from us to find out who to get permission from, to get him out of wherever he was staying, which dentist was even going to be available, to get him to who's going to pay for it, because a wisdom tooth extraction is not a cheap thing, which volunteers are going to get permission to go and ferry him. I'm just giving you all these examples, but this was just one day, one instance, and we were getting like 15 of these situations every day that each of us was probably dealing with during COVID.
Can I ask you, what drove you to continue doing this work?
That is a recurring question. It's a question we are forced to ask ourselves and answer every day because it is not easy. It's I call it verging on compassion burnout sometimes. I call it transference of trauma because, you're a human being and I'm a human being. And when you hear stories like this all the time, imagine if you spent a day hearing 10 such stories and you had to be helping and you had your own problems and your own kids and your own work. And, I have a day job as well and, other things when you could just as easily be sitting in a corner or in a couch reading a book. Right? Because I don't have to do this. This doesn't pay my bills. But I think, I started this and the volunteers who've joined the movement came on board because we feel we owe a debt to these migrant workers. And many of us have had very close interactions with them. My phone is here and I have the number to a lot of migrant workers on here and they have mine. So there is a personal relationship built. And I think we feel if we stop doing this, then who would?
Who would? Exactly. Let me ask you something, Dipa. I read in one of your interviews about the verbiage that we use for this community. We call them migrant workers.
I meant to say they're not migratory, they are resident because they give their entire working lives to Singapore. 22 years is actually a majority of that individual's working life, because unlike you or me who sit at a desk and do work with mics or papers or pens, and we can carry on doing this till we're 70 or whatever, when you're doing back-breaking physical labor, there is a time span to it. Tennis athletes have a much smaller lifespan. These guys are doing physical work. Their bodies will give. So 22 years is actually probably, there's not much more runway beyond that.
I'm going to show you a comment one of the viewers of one of our older episodes made. And can we just bring that up, please? I had asked in one of my comedy satire episodes of the Rishi Report about what the difference is between migrant workers and expatriates. Why is it that one group is called an expatriate group, one is called migrant workers? And this was back in 2020, just for some context. And for those listening in on Spotify, the comment is, I think the difference is that a lot did not just come here to work. We came here to live. I believe this is someone from the expat community. Hence, expatriate. We left our country behind, and the only way to live in a new country is to work in it. Duh. I got to add that in for context. Some of us plan on dying here and having relationships and children here. That's why there is a difference. Justifiable. What are your first thoughts on this?
This individual, what they're saying is, we came here to live as opposed to work. What does that mean? That means you had the privilege of bringing your family here, of having a nice house, of being able to go and have dinner at a pub on a Saturday evening. Migrant workers don't have that luxury.
Yep.
They come here. They too want to live here. Don't think they come here to do something less, but they're not allowed to bring their families. They can't afford it. So they come and they live here to the best of, whatever their meager wages will allow.
Yep.
But this distinction of we come here to live, they come here to work is a very artificial one. It's one spoken by somebody who's sitting in a place of privilege.
Yep.
If they could bring their families, if they could rent a house, if they could go out and have dinner on Boat Quay on Saturday night, they too would. They can't.
Yep. No, I'm with you on that. I agree with you. And I think this distinction that you just mentioned is something I feel that we sometimes forget. The privilege that we sit with, whether you are living here as an expatriate, whether you are living here as a citizen, a resident, because the issue of wages, you mentioned affordability, right? They would also, they want to live a good life here. But right now, if you can give us a bit of an insight into what the wage range of some of these communities are at present in Singapore.
I can only speak as to the male migrant workers.
Sure.
And you're absolutely right in saying that there is a range. So don't take anything I'm about to say as a generalization or a fact. But the starting daily wage for many workers that we know, based on anecdotal, evidence, is $18 a day, not $18 an hour. It's $18 a day. Now, there are many workers who've lived here for longer, who are paid more. There are other companies that, just generally pay, higher daily wages. But I just want to say that there are still migrant workers in Singapore who earn a daily wage of $18. Now, because that's not much, right? That translates to about $450 a month, which is really not very much. So then in order to make up, they then work overtime.
Yep.
But then you have to remember that if an individual is working overtime, it probably means they're working 7 days of the week and then probably not getting adequate rest. And then when you're not getting adequate rest, you might become weak, you might fall ill. And then if you don't have, the ability to take medical leave, etc., or you don't want to because you fear that you may lose a day's wages by doing so, that's when you can have workplace injuries and so on. So, it's really a whole ecosystem we need to keep in mind when we're talking about wages.
Is there any indication that we are moving towards a model of minimum wage for this group?
Not from where I sit. I mean, I think those decisions are above my pay grade, so to speak.
Yep.
But I do hope, it is my prayer and hope that we do move. It doesn't have to be called a minimum wage, but if we can at least get to a place where we set like a benchmark.
Yep.
that, because I think this number has remained the same as far as I know for, maybe around 20 years. So if we can at least say, as a benchmark, as a market practice, it has to move from, say, 18 to 22, without necessarily calling it a minimum wage, that might be an improvement, So I think, there are obviously other constraints, right? There are industry constraints, there are economic reasons and all of that we hear about when these issues are brought up. Now, I don't want to comment on, which side holds more sway, but I just think that, I'm a believer in karma, and I'm a believer in just doing the morally correct thing for those who are the weakest among us, There's just that human decency. I mean, forget everything else. It's just a case of basic human decency. So I hope we let those sentiments guide us when we make these kinds of decisions.
Yep. I know you mentioned that it's not possible for you to fully analyze and extrapolate why there is no increment in the wage for the past 20 years. But
well, I don't want to generalize 20 years. I've only been in this space for 11. But again, based on anecdotal evidence, I understand that, those numbers have not shifted very much for a long time.
Why do you think that is, in your experience and opinion?
Well, I think it's because it can be. I mean, if you can get away with paying somebody something, then, and if there is no legal or other pressure to increase, then, why would you? I mean, I work for a company and, companies are expected to pay, certain amounts. There are market rates, etc. There's benchmarking, etc. But if that is where the benchmark is, I mean, there are generous and kind employers, I'm sure, who go over and above and pay more. But if you didn't have to, then, I mean, why would you, right? It's just economics.
If someone is willing to do that work at that salary, why would you?
There is that as well, that, that workers keep coming. So the thinking must be, well, hey, if it's too low, why do they keep coming to work at these wages? But what also happens, I mean, there are so many other forces at play here, right? We've seen so many cases of workers who are promised something on paper and then come here and find what they're getting is something completely different. But meantime, they've already paid exorbitant loans, exorbitant agency fees. They've taken loans to pay exorbitant agents fees to come here. They can't go back.
Sure.
I don't know, who they would go and talk to, but broadly speaking, migrant workers who come here from other countries, come here through, the use of an agent who they pay, it could be anything from $8,000 to $10,000. I mean, anybody who has a foreign domestic worker may know this. And I think the loan amounts are much lesser for female domestic workers. But for male migrant workers, it is around, like I say, anywhere between $8,000 to $12,000.
Okay.
And given these, salary amounts that I've spoken about, it usually takes them close to 2 years to pay back those loans and actually start, seeing the benefit of why they even came here. But if a calamity were to happen in those first sort of 24 months, which means either they lost their job or they had an injury that forced them to go back, it's calamitous for them. Because, they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They've got this massive loan. Sometimes they've mortgaged the family's land, sold everybody's jewelry. It's everything was put on the line to enable them to come here in the hope that this will pay off, which in many cases it does. Like the workers who've been here for 22 years, God bless them because they've managed to work here healthily and happily, presumably. But those workers don't come to IRR. Nobody calls IRR and says, hey, IRR, I'm just calling you to say everything is going swimmingly well for me. We only get to know when something has gone wrong, which is why my earlier point about the transference of trauma. So we hear about the cases where, something has gone wrong and the worker is stuck. So we've also fundraised in some of those cases. I remember this young worker who came here. I think we thought he was barely 18. I don't even know how he came here.
Okay.
I think, maybe he had put a wrong date on his passport or whatever. Came here and found he had TB, or at least they suspected TB. So he had to go back.
Oh.
And he had taken this massive loan, and he was barely here for a few days, and they were going to put him back. And we just thought his future is just going to be killed, because there's probably going to be agents waiting for him back home.
Yeah.
To say, how are you going to pay us all this, or whatever, wherever he had taken the loan from, right, to pay the agents. And so we fundraised for him. We thought, he shouldn't leave Singapore with his faith in humanity shattered. So we fundraised for him. And I remember that our volunteer rushed to the airport, because we found out about this case, I think, on the day that he was leaving. And we put out a story and we put out a link, and we managed to fundraise. And our volunteer actually withdrew her own cash, because, by the time it comes from a link like, Ray of Hope, all that takes time.
Right.
And rushed to the airport.
To give him cash.
To give him, before he was, put on a plane to go back, because we didn't want this young man to have his future snuffed out before it had even had a chance to begin.
Good on you and the team. Thank you for doing that. Tell me about this term you just used, transference of trauma. Explain to me what happens in that.
Well, I think what I mean by that, it's a term I've coined myself. I don't know if it exists, but it works for what I'm trying.
I've personally heard of variations of this. They talk about how you have generational trauma that is transferred from one generation to another. I'm guessing you're talking about something different here.
Yeah. I'm just talking about, when you're in the business of helping other individuals, and those individuals are constantly in, situations of trauma and crisis and emergencies, and that is the daily sort of ecosystem within which you operate as a volunteer. And you hear these stories. Most of us are here doing this because we're sensitive by nature. If I was cold-hearted and completely unaffected, I probably wouldn't even be here doing this. So the very fact that me and my volunteers do this, I would think that our predisposition is to be sensitive. We're predisposed to being sensitive. And so in that case, you naturally tend to get affected when you hear these stories constantly of distress. And then you internalize it. You carry a weight in your head. You might that evening be in a cocktail party, dressed in a nice black gown, holding a glass of champagne, making vacuous conversation in a drawing room. But there's a part of you that is somewhere else, that has seen something that day that nobody else in that room has seen. And you have to live both lives. And
how do you negotiate that? How have you negotiated that for the past 10 years?
I have an extra drink on those nights.
Okay. Well, fair.
So, yeah.
No judgments there.
No, but I don't mean to make light of it, but it's something you have to learn to do. You have to learn to, you can't disassociate, because you have to live a normal life, because otherwise you can't carry on.
I'm guessing it's what a lot of psychologists or psychiatrists who see multiple patients a day perhaps go through to a certain degree as well.
Yeah. So, I won't lie. I've been in therapy, and, you get some tools, in terms of how to cope with, these kinds of situations. And you try to employ those tools as best as you can.
Yep.
I have to constantly remind myself that if I burn out and if I crash, then that's not going to be of use to anyone. So there has to be a little bit of self-care and self-preservation. And that's true for my volunteers as well, because, our volunteers at It's Raining Raincoats are really the ones who keep the wheels of the organization churning. It's, I may be the one on your podcast and, other media interviews, but it is by no means a one-person show. It's a village. And many of our volunteers have been with IRR for years. And, they have grown into positions of leadership within It's Raining Raincoats. They do amazing work. And they bring a level of professionalism to their contributions to It's Raining Raincoats. That's astounding. You couldn't pay good money to get that kind of caliber. These are not people who just say, oh, yeah, whatever, I'll just do a little bit here and there. They apply themselves with so much discipline and commitment and heart.
Yep. It's been the case for this year, at least, that every time there's a crisis and every time the first respondents happen to be a group of migrant workers, multiple issues to do with their lives and livelihoods in Singapore come to light in the media, in the press, in discussions in society. I think earlier this year there was a case of the River Valley fire where there were some of them who came and initiated and completed the rescue. And then again, in Tanjung Katong, the case of the sinkhole. Why is it that only in times of crisis do some of these issues come to light, you feel?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just want to say that we also fundraise for those workers, and we had a similar meet and greet for
I'm
them.
aware, yes.
When we did the event for the River Valley workers, many of the parents of the children they rescued came and addressed them. Some of them weep. I mean, there was not a dry eye in the house because, when they wept while addressing the workers, thanking them for saving their children, they were, everybody else wept too. So
this is great in terms of unfortunate incidents, of course. Fortunately, these people were there as first respondents by choice or by instinct or by initiative. But what is the follow-up then? You as an organization, you can do the fundraiser, you can do the media interviews, you can educate society in a way that, hey, this is the case. Like what we're doing right now, I'm sure there's for me, it was news that there are still some of these workers who are paid $18 a day. Mm-hmm. It was news to me. Mm-hmm. These are educational elements that we are hopefully spreading to people for them to understand. What then is the follow-up from the rest of us in society?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has a part to play. I was actually going to do a post about how anyone can help migrant workers that doesn't involve giving money or volunteering. One of those things could just be giving way to a lorry with migrant workers sitting in the back when they want to change lanes. Mm-hmm. Those lorries are always the ones that give way to other cars. But it's such a simple thing anybody can do because they have to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And if they keep braking all the time, the workers are going to get injured. So really, anybody who drives a vehicle on Singapore's roads, I would beg and plead them. When you see a lorry trying to change lanes, a lorry that has migrant workers seated at the back, please give them way. It costs nothing, but you would be doing them a huge favor.
By improving the safety of that ride.
Yes, and just making it easy for those drivers who may also be migrant workers themselves. Imagine, do you drive a car?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. I don't know how good a driver you are, but how would you feel if you had to drive a lorry with 15 men seated at the back without...
Yep, not
right?
good. Not good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So this is what I'm saying is that people need to put themselves in the shoes of a migrant worker. Just do it notionally. And think, if you were that driver... It's hard enough to constantly be thinking, oh my God, I've got 15 men at the back without seatbelts and I have to get them there safely. They're not doing it once, they're doing it every day. And they're not doing it on a calm side road, they're doing it on the highways.
Yeah. I'm going to share a personal story here. Mm-hmm. I went to the Traffic Police HQ earlier this year to renew my driver's license.
I think I know what you're about to say, and I think I'm going to feel very sad when I hear this.
Oh dear, do you? We've not spoken about this off air, but when you are queuing up to enter, there's a lot of migrant workers queuing up with forms, with emails that even I found difficult to understand, with a queue number that you're supposed to download from somewhere. And the way some of the staff were treating these folks, it angered me in that moment. And I had to go and talk to them. I said, why this guy doesn't understand, obviously. If you raise your voice and scream at him to say, where's the email, where's the confirmation, where's the appointment? If he didn't understand once and he goes off and he tries to find and he doesn't understand again, it's not going to make it better. So is there someone who can help them? So I asked one of the officers there, I was like, bro, is this like that every day? And the officer, in all good faith, he said, bro, I really wish I could tell you it's not, but imagine if you are the guard there and you've got like 10 people who don't know what they're supposed to do, and they're there to try and change their license or pay a fine, or sometimes they're trying to get the points or whatever it is that they're trying to do there. You will get frustrated. And he said that their employers don't bother bringing them down because the employers will know what to do in these cases. The employers are the ones who probably send them there. Like, hey, your driver license is going to change. You're going to apply. You're going to do this. It's just apparently the way it is. And I was just flabbergasted, man, because I'm like, how can one of the most efficient countries in the world and the traffic police department at that level not have a more efficient way of dealing with this?
See, when I hear things like this, I react, but by wanting to do something, right?
Yeah.
So I'm already thinking, as you were saying this, that maybe we should have a volunteer stream where we have volunteers be there, on a roster basis. They could just be standing outside and helping migrant workers, just be their chaperone.
Yeah.
And maybe we could write to the traffic police and say, can we work in collaboration with you? Where, we send some of our volunteers, but you can also designate somebody to work in partnership with us, because it will make everybody's lives easier. This is what I call a whole of society benefit. That driver having to go back 3 times is not going to do his employer any good, because a guy has to be taken off his shift to go there.
Yep.
The traffic police people who may be frustrated enough to raise their voice, that's not a good situation to be in either.
Yep.
But if you could find a solution to this, everybody would be happier. And it's not that difficult. It's not rocket science.
Yep. No,
but that's how
I'm with you.
various streams of help at IRR have developed, because our motto is keep it simple, be nimble, make it happen.
Okay. Fair. Catchy. Yeah.
And we're very nimble because, for example, in this River Valley, incident or the thing, we were able to raise all this money in how many hours? In 43 hours.
Quite remarkable. $70,000 in 43 hours.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Wow.
With a staff of 2. I mean, it wasn't our money. I mean, but it takes time to get the workers' contact, which
set things up, essentially.
Set things up. And we never do these things without getting the consent of the workers. Do they even want us to fund? Because, we can't presume that, a worker may even want any funds, right?
Yep.
So we always respect their individuality. And so to connect with them, get their permissions, write the appeal, put it on social media, set up a giving.sg link, broadcast it. All this takes time, but we're able to react very quickly in these kinds of situations. But and thank you for sharing what you did with me, because I didn't know that. So you've learned some new things from me and I've learned some from you, but now I won't sit idle on this. Like, I can't do that. Like, I can't go to bed today saying, that's a bit sad, but, whatever.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean...
that is a load that I carry. So that is transference of trauma, because now this has become my problem.
I don't know if things have changed. I was there one day, but I'm hoping if they haven't, then there's an opportunity for us to make it better. Like you say, a society-wide benefit. I've got one final question before we wrap things up here, because you mentioned a little bit about the lorries that some of these communities are transported in, and the conveyance. There's been a lot of discussion on that. There's been multiple times it's been raised in Parliament, even about trying to change this mode of transport. Where are we on that in your on-ground experience right now? Is that a reality that we will see soon, that we stop doing this transport of the workers together with the heavy equipment at the back of these lorries?
Well, I mean, if I had to be perfectly honest, I'm no wiser than you. And you're right. We have been, involved with conversations and discussions around that with various stakeholders several times over the years. And we've done a lot of research and due diligence, in terms of understanding from workers how they're transported. There are companies, and really hats off to them, the ones that transport their workers in buses. I just hope, more and more employers will do that just out of, again, going back to the human decency thing. It's not prescribed by law, but just being decent to the men who feed your bottom line, right? So just from that perspective, but from a policy perspective, when are we going to see that shift? I hope it's sooner rather than later, but more than that, I couldn't say.
Dipa, thanks so much for making time to be on this show. I think the work that you and your team do is incredibly valuable to society. Final parting words about what you see as the future of IRR, It's Raining Raincoats, the organization that you founded 10 years ago, and maybe something for the listeners and the viewers on how they can contribute to this effort.
So this is our 10th year. So, we're always looking for more volunteers. So people can reach out to me on, I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm always very happy when people contact me directly. They can reach out to the social media pages of It's Raining Raincoats as well. We're always looking for funds. We're looking for volunteers. We're looking for professional support, technology, things like that. We're looking for people with wheels, to transport the migrant workers that you spoke about.
Yes.
From Tuas to the airport. So really, time and heart, if you have those, then reach out to us. When I give talks in schools, I always begin by saying, what's free for the rest of us, but precious to migrant workers? And the answer is ice. If you think about ice, if you're doing roadworks on the PIE for months, where will you get ice? There are no refrigerators. There's no office with refrigerators. If you're 20,000 workers living in a dorm or whatever, even if it's 3,000 workers, there aren't, 300 refrigerators. There may be, 3 or 4, but not enough for everybody to get ice. Migrant workers love ice. So you could just fill a can with just ice, which costs nothing, just fill, and pass it to migrant workers in your neighborhood. So these are just things. So this is what I mean when I say, if you just think about their everyday and just put yourself notionally in their shoes, you would get a lot of ideas on how you could help them without necessarily going and volunteering with an organization or giving money to someone.
That's very good. I really appreciate you sharing some of the practical, really small steps that people can take to make their lives better. Dipa, I wish you and It's Raining Raincoats the very best.
Thank you.
Keep the good work you're doing continuous, and we hope to be able to support you in some of your future endeavors. Thanks for being on the show. If you have time, if you've got heart, if you've got wheels, or if you've just got some ice, you can make a difference to the migrant worker communities in Singapore. And if you're interested to learn a bit more about what It's Raining Raincoats does, we're going to leave some links down in the description below. This has been an episode of the Rishi Report SG60 podcast special. We'll see you on our next episode with our next guest, who's also been making some wonderful contributions to the nation. We'll see you soon.